Donald Trump and Mark Carney go to Asia at the same time to the same location. Donald Trump closes a $100 billion deal and gets the tentative framework lined up for peace negotiations with China. Mark Carney appears on stage giggling and holding hands of other leaders. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Well, there's been a lot of changes in the trade situation between Canada and the United States over the last couple of days. You'll remember when Donald Trump severed talks with Canada due to the actions of Doug Ford, a premier of Ontario. Now, Doug Ford, he wants to tell himself that he's finally got Donald Trump's attention and that he wants to now show Donald Trump that he's not backing down. Of course, Doug Ford has no idea the ramifications that are going to curtail from that. There's no promises that Donald Trump will come back to the table, for example. And Kuzma gets closer with every single day. Mark Carney and Donald Trump were both in Malaysia, and they ended up with two different outcomes. Not only did Donald Trump write a trade deal with a country when he was down there, he managed to hammer out a framework with China. So now he's managed to get a deal with China. He's managed to make a peace deal between Israel and Hamas. He's managed to make a peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Yet Canada can't get a trade deal despite Mark Carney's insistence that he's the guy that was going to be able to handle Donald Trump. He's the businessman. He understands how all of these things work. Mark Carney seems to be more concerned about how his portfolio is growing, not caring very much about anything that is happening on the ground in Canada. When he was in Malaysia, all he ended up doing was posing for a picture holding hands with world leaders. And before we get into all this, I want to encourage you to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with all of your socials. All right, let's get into this. All right, we'll start at the beginning. Trump has put 10% more tariff on Canada. This is I picked up from the CBC. Trump says he's hiking tariffs on Canada by 10% over Ontario government ad. Ford government planned to pull the ad on Monday after airing in the U.S. during the World Series. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced on social media he will be increasing the tariff on Canada by 10% over and above what they are paying now because of an advertisement by the Ontario government. Canada was caught red-handed putting up a fraudulent advertisement on Ronald Reagan's speech on tariffs. Trump wrote on the platform Truth Social on Saturday afternoon. Their advertisement was to be taken down immediately, but they let it run last night during the World Series, knowing it was a fraud, the U.S. president added. I'm not going to read the whole article with you. I do believe that ethically, Doug Ford should not have created an ad that wasn't 100% accurate. And when he found that it wasn't accurate, leave the trade aside. When the Ontario government found out that what they were running was a manipulation, an edit of the words that were said, indicating, of course, that what was being portrayed in the ad could never, ever be 100% accurate because they had to change it. So it makes it a lie, makes it a fraud. And you want me to believe what? That you're honorable? You ran an ad you knew to be a lie, and then you went ahead and ran it again and again. And now you want Canadians to what? Rally around you? The second that it goes against us, you'll only do the same thing. And I'm not going to read the whole article, but I will read two things. Flavio Volpe, president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association and a member of Prime Minister Carney's Council on Canada-U.S. Relations. Oh yeah, he's a neutral guy. He's the kind of guy you want looking after your job. Said on social media, to be clear, which just gives me a Letterkenny flashback. A TV commercial is about to cost the American consumer about $50 billion because Trump's mad. How does he arrive at that number? Does he know what the tariffs are on? Because Trump hasn't even announced. So how does he arrive at that number? And remember, once you take steel, aluminum, and the automotive sector out of the argument, and oil, the Americans send much more product to Canada than the other way around. And of course, Mark Carney's way, he's going to replace all that made in America with made in China. Because that's the kind of ethical manufacturing that the liberals talk about. The other paragraph that I want to take out of here, just before Trump cut off trade talks, Ronald Reagan President Foundation and Institute said, it took issue with the ad and claimed the Ontario government, quote, did not seek or receive permission to use and edit the remark. So not only did he violate the copyright, which, what? You from Ontario, the government, Premier of Ontario, you can't take the time to ensure that you don't break the law when you run an ad? Violate the copyright law? I guess you're more like the Chinese than we all thought. On top of that, they know what was said. They have a copy of everything he said. It's the Ronald Reagan Institute and Foundation. They probably have shots of him from when he's in the movies. They know where the address came from on the radio address because it was 1987 and people still listen to the radio. And they know exactly what you edited, what you took out. If you want to be the man that you claim to be, Mr. Ford, if you want to have the Ontario people and the Canadian people believe that you have ethics, if you are wanting us to believe that your moral compass is ethically guided, you should never have run that ad again. So now, on top of everything else, on stomping your feet and pouring alcohol down the drain, but not beating your car with a sledgehammer and all the rest of those kinds of things, you've now sent messages into the United States of America that were untrue. And at the cost of $75 million, well, I say $75 million, but really you borrowed that money. So it's probably going to be $100 million by the time it's all said and done. This is a bad look. And nothing about what you're trying to claim that it's going to solve is anything other than schoolyard stuff. Just foolish childishness where you started a rumor that wasn't true so that you could try to get even with a guy who can clearly wipe the floor with you. All the while, jobs are flying out. You're doing nothing to improve production. You're doing nothing to improve productivity. And the deficit is rising with every passing minute because you can't generate any taxes. And all of the tax base that is being generated is going down into the United States. You should be wasting your time on Donald Trump, and you should be focusing on Mark Carney, getting not looking at him with hearts in your eyes like you have been, but making sure that you put the pressure from Ontario onto the government, federal government, to remove those 9 laws. I don't care if you have a very vocal minority in downtown Toronto saying that we should never bend a blade of grass. Read a book, understand what economic hardship looks like, and understand how that does not in any way, shape, or form improve the lives of the people that it impacts. CTV is reporting that Mark Carney didn't even receive advance notice from Donald Trump. So that's a solid relationship that they got going on. Donald Trump says that I'm not going to be talking to you about trade negotiations anymore. Mark Carney says, whatever. If you change your mind, let me know. Then Donald Trump adds 10% on the tariffs. And how did the CTV put it? A senior government official says Prime Minister Mark Carney was not given advance notice by U.S. President Donald Trump when he announced an additional 10% on tariffs. So, I mean, you are not even trying to negotiate with a guy when you don't tell him what you're about to do. You simply do it. Good job, Carney. Good job, Ford. You make investment impossible in this country. You make starting a new company or starting a new industry impossible in this country. And then the only country that we are able to sell our stuff to, you go ahead and disrespect to the point that they're not even willing to talk to you. What's really bizarre about the entire thing is that Donald Trump and Mark Carney are both at the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur, which is ASEAN. So we literally have people support staff for Donald Trump and support staff for Mark Carney and any of the people that they got traveling with them. And nobody took the time to warn the Canadians that it was coming. They're literally in the same room. didn't take the time to tell them. Can you imagine what that says about our standing in the world? Can you appreciate what all of these countries that Mark Carney is down there trying to convince to do business with us, which of course they're not going to do? No way. They don't want to buy anything that we manufacture, and we don't have enough money to convince them to turn away from the branches that Donald Trump's America is offering. There's a reason that Trump can get the whole wide world to do what he wants, and nobody takes Canada seriously. We have to stop looking abroad, guys, and start thinking about creating money on our own. And the first place to begin creating money on our own is to get rid of all those environmental foolishness that the liberal government has imposed on this country in the last 11 years, causing us to slip from being the 8th richest country on earth to the 12th, 13th. However, while all of this was going on, okay, Donald Trump's people have managed to make a tentative agreement with China over the critical minerals. Spectacular, right? U.S.-China reach rare earth tariff pause for Trump and Xi to consider. Now, the idea is that from here, they're going to go to South Korea. They're going to have another summit. And China's going to go to that summit because that will be in the area that China's in. Korea is very close to China. And at that point, Trump and Xi are going to be in the same room, and the idea is that they'll come away with the Chinese putting a 1-year moratorium on the Americans. Like they're going to pause making the Americans pay more for the rare earth materials, and Trump is going to go lower on the tariffs so that the Chinese can get at the American market. Because remember, everybody, the American market is set up in such a way that they make the average individual person, the middle class, makes money, so the middle class can spend money. And when you spend money, countries all around the world are like, hey, you want to buy my stuff? Canada could be doing that, but we have very small vocal groups like the Liberal Party trying to convince us all that we won't bend a blade of grass, and that somehow in the dead of winter in the minus 40, it's going to be okay to use electricity to heat your house. But don't worry, Mark Carney is also making moves down there in Kuala Lumpur. Yeah, you guessed it. There he is. Look at him, Prime Minister of Canada. The whole country's going hungry. The whole country has a homelessness problem. Ontario wants to make it so that you can kick anybody out of their house at any time without cause. And he's down there holding hands and smiling like a clown, smiling like a kid at his birthday party. Looks like he's about to start one of those line dances you always see people do. They're holding hands and smiling for the camera. You know, there's only him and the one fella on the end that are smiling. Everybody else is looking very serious. And that's probably to do with the fact that, you know, it's a serious job to be the leader of a country. And to be standing up on stage and holding hands, showing some sort of unity is one thing. To be doing it with that look on your face, well, that's completely different altogether. However, CTV is reporting that Carney tells the ASEAN Summit Canada respects trade rules. Whoa, can you feel the vibration from all of the countries running to Canada to invest their money and knowing full well that the Carney government has got so many laws against investment that it would cost them an extra $1 billion to do it in Canada, and they might be able to do it in 10 years, and they can do it in under 60 days in the United States for $1 billion less. But, you know, we respect the trade rules. As Trump threatened news tariff. I mean, CTV should be talking about the fact that Mark Carney is not getting a deal at all, that he's in the room with Donald Trump, but Donald Trump is imposing higher tariffs, doing all kinds of stuff. Instead, they want to make you believe that Mark Carney is actually doing what he isn't doing. And they post this picture of him holding hands because I'm sure to the far left mentality, that's some sort of a symbolism. But I, unfortunately for them, can dissect a photo very, very well. Picture speaks 1,000 words, right? And the smile says it all. The smile says, I'm not really serious about your problems, Canada. I'm down here having a great time, loving Kuala Lumpur, and I'm loving all of the extra bonuses and everything that I got. I got here on a private plane that Canadians pay for. It's going to stay in a sweet hotel tonight. And I got a big old smile on my face up here on this stage. Everybody else is pretty serious around me. They're thinking in their minds that they're not very interested in doing business with me. And they're wondering if this photo is going to harm their chances with the United States, with the current diplomatic situation between the United States and Canada. But I'm not worried about that because I'm Mark Carney, and I just want to have holding hands thinks that that's enough to convince the very minor vocal groups in my 3 or 4 major cities that somehow everything is going to be rosy and wonderful. Now, on top of all of this, back here in Canada, the Liberal House Leader released a statement to the CBC indicating that he doesn't feel they have the votes to pass the budget. Right now, we don't have the votes to pass the federal budget, says Liberal House Leader Steve McKinnon, pressing opposition parties to consider if they want another election. Liberal House Leader Steve McKinnon says the government does not have enough votes at the moment to pass the upcoming federal budget, and he's pressing opposition parties to consider whether or not they want another election. As we speak right now, McKinnon said in an interview with Rosemary Barton, airing Sunday morning, he acknowledged Canada has a minority government, but argued that the Liberals have a mandate to move this country forward economically. Excellent. Repeal those 9 laws and you will absolutely get the budgetary support that you require. Liberal government will need cooperation of at least one other party in order to pass the budget, which is being tabled on November 4th because the budget is a confidence vote. Canadians could be facing another election if it doesn't pass. Now, this is an interesting question, right? If we pass the budget, if we say, okay, let's let the NDP get their leadership race figured out, and then the NDP can come in and take back some of the seats that the Liberal Party has, and that will mean that the government will be conservative because the Liberal Party got most of the NDP seats. But we can't really afford to wait that long. I mean, really, we've already burned 7 months on Mark Carney stalling Canadians, talking about how it's elbows up, and then talking about how it's no big deal, and then talking about how, well, if he wants to talk to us, we'll talk to us. All the while, no development is happening inside of the country, right? No jobs are being developed because of the ridiculous taxes, because of the ridiculous laws. There's 9 pieces of legislation. They amount to, you're not allowed to build anything, you're not allowed to make a pipeline, and we're going to stop any ships sailing down the coast, on top of these horrible taxes. I mean, everybody knows that Canada is taxed through the roof. That's what happens in a far left government because they make a lot of promises and they waste a lot of money, and then they have to increase the taxes because that's the only thing they know how to do. Of course, it would be great if we were getting more tax revenue from 4 or 5 pipelines that were pumping out natural gas and oil to all the different thirsty locations around the world. But that's, again, part of the problem. And everywhere you look at any of the Liberal policies, they are part of the problem, not part of the solution. Steve McKinnon indicates that what he's trying to do there is he's trying to get everybody to blame the Conservatives. But if the Conservatives are of the bloc don't support the budget, that's their right. Let's take a page right out of the mouth of the left and let's just say it in a way that they might understand. They have that right to speak their own truth. The Conservatives don't like the way that you're wasting money. The Conservatives don't have to support what you say. What you want to ask yourself is, how come this government is wasting money and doesn't have a budget that people can agree on? That's what you want to ask yourself. As you see your food prices creeping ever higher and higher. I warned all of you that by October it would be bad for Canada. I further told all of you that by October it would be great for the Americans. And now I will tell you that by February we will be in a very bad way. Christmas is going to be very, very hard on business in Canada. We're going to be reverting to some 1800s Christmas where people are hand making things, and that's fine. That's great. I mean, Christmas to me is not about being commercialized. But it is a very big indicator of how good the economy is doing when we see who's spending what on what. And I'm telling you, with the way food prices are, with the laws that the Liberal government has put in place, that it is going to be bad for Canadians at the till, and they are going to speak about that with their wallet. Now you have to tell yourself,
How can we stop having a government that is so ideologically driven on the green part, on blades of grass, and not ideologically driven on providing you with quality housing, quality food, and a quality standard of living? Why are those not their ideology? That's the question that you have to ask yourself, because if we do come into another election, we have to get out and vote in massive numbers to get this government out of the way. I'm not telling you that the Conservatives or the Bloc would have been better with Donald Trump. I'm telling you that the Conservatives would have been able to start industry in this country already. The jobs would be offset by the development of other industries. Those people that are flying into the States, that are fleeing down there to hope that they can pick up another job on the midnight shift in Indiana, might just as easily consider to move to northern Saskatchewan to help build the pipeline, or might easily as consider to just try to convince the Ontario government to open up a shipyard on the Great Lakes. They would find other jobs. These are capable people that know how to use heavy tools and heavy equipment. So if you give them 90 days to get comfortable, they'll be quite happy to continue on their way. There are other issues and other factors that we have to address, but none of them can be tackled without a strong economy. But Mark Carney, with his book Values, he wants you to believe that it's better to have some sort of a strong, I don't know what, trees, while he flies jumbo jets all over the world. Puts gigantic smiles on his faces when he should be worried about the lives of Canadians, when he should be concerned that there's no trade deal and that 10% increase is going on. His own words are, it's an existential threat to our very way of life. He should be more worried about that, but he didn't look at it in that photo, did he? Now, Steve McKinnon coming out, MP McKinnon, claiming that from what he's talked to, the Conservatives and the Bloc are not going to support the budget. And the NDP right now, they're just going to go whichever way the people that they want to vote for them will go. If it means triggering an election, I say we go for it. I say that the Liberal government cannot be trusted to look after our best interests. They are putting everything and everyone ahead of us. One of those factors is, of course, what Mark Carney promised Donald Trump he would do on defense. Canada, according to the CTV, walking a fine line. Economists caution Canada on commitment to defense sector. Now, if you're truly an economist, you don't care about politics. You're simply looking at the numbers, and the numbers are what we're going to be talking about here. There's no emotion in that. There's no party colors in that. The numbers are very neutral. The numbers have no emotion, no feeling, nothing. Anybody who's out there that works in the economic sector knows this. Anybody who out there who's throwing, who's painting pictures or being artistic for a living might not appreciate what I'm having to tell you. But just realize that, when it comes to numbers, it's just like looking at a neutral color palette. It doesn't have an opinion one way or another. It's simply going to regurgitate the issues, just like the neutral is going to help you base on what's going to go where. So don't take it personal. Let's realize that the better standard of living impacts all of us. All of us. And that's really what we have to think about. We can get back to this other foolishness 5 years from now when we've stabilized housing prices and food prices, got our deficit down. Then we can go back to talking about party lines and all the rest of it. Just want to pick up one thing from here. Carney government recently announced plans to raise Canada's military budget to $150 billion to meet a NATO target of 5% GDP, the country's largest increase since the Second World War. The current budget sits at $62 billion after Ottawa added $9 billion this year. Some economists are skeptical about Canada reaching that target. We are this much money in debt, and our current military budget is at $62 billion, and our current interest payments are at $58 billion. Seems to me that what we should do is turn on the pipes, get our economy up and running, and then we won't have to borrow any money. They don't borrow money in every country around the world. They only borrow money in some countries. Why Canada is paying almost as much for our military as we are for interest payments, while we're paying as much for our interest payments as we're paying for our hospitals. That's a strong indication of where our money is going and what is wrong with our standard of living. I mean, if you went to a banker and asked them to help you get your finances in order, the first thing they would do is consolidate all of your loans and try to renegotiate a interest payment. It's not not complicated. I mean, anybody with a basic grade 5 education in math can understand this. The Liberal government is pulling on your heartstrings because they want you to think that somehow ideologically being opposed to Donald Trump, is going to somehow improve your standard of living. And then they go and Mark Carney comes out and says, no, but you have to make sacrifices for the next 10 or 15 years while he flies gigantic jumbo jets, lands in Kuala Lumpur, and has gigantic smile from ear to ear on his face. So where's his sacrifice? What sacrifices are the Liberal government making exactly? Because I don't see any of them, and I watch closely. And it's time that Canadians work together to ensure that our leadership does what we think should be our number one priority. Because I guess it'll be a wonderful green utopia when we're all scrounging around looking for crickets to eat in the dead of winter. I'm not sure that we're going to find that many. However, if you want to solve the problems that we have, if you want to have a better standard of living, if you want to live in a neighborhood that you're surrounded by people that you think like you do, whatever that thoughts happen to be, the simplest way to do that is to have the financial independence of a decent job and then inexpensive housing, quality food. I mean, this is a formula that's as old as humanity. It's not a secret. It's no surprises in what I just said. Mark Carney wants to double how much money we're paying for the military. Where do you figure that money's coming from? Why is that money being generated from your minimum wage job and not being generated from the trillions of dollars that would come out from natural gas? Why would that not be a better way to pay for this military improvement? And why has Mr. Businessman, Mr. Economics Major, Mr. I can deal with Donald Trump not come to that rationalization? Why do we allow the Liberal government to put laws in place that are stopping economic development at one of the times in our lives when we are the poorest and the most precarious position when it comes to our finances? It's time Canadians realize that there's only one way out of this mess, and that's to generate money. We can't say, let's hold hands on stage with everybody from Kuala Lumpur. We can't say, we're going to let the Europeans get us out of this mess. We can't say, let's become Marxists and deal with China. Capitalism solves the problem. Capitalism is what we need to embrace. And the Liberal government is not capitalist government. Liberal government is not looking out for our best interests. You can see now after 6 months of absolutely nothing accomplished, he's done nothing but spend more money and talk. But the jobs numbers, the unemployment's rising. I mean, the situations and the problems that the Liberal Party assured us was all the fault of COVID and all of the fault of this and all of the fault of Putin are still here. Those problems are gone away, and yet those problems are still here. All of those problems that Mark Carney assured us were going away with, if you simply gave him your vote, they're still here. I ask you to ask yourself, why do you want to live in hardship when the solution to an easier way of life, to a better standard of living, is simply repeal 9 laws, ignore whatever Donald Trump is doing, and start to focus on the development inside of this country? Not, I'll pick one program here and there and once every 10 years. No, get out of the way. Shovels in the ground, start building simultaneously across the country in every place that we can get a shovel in the ground, and leave the Liberal government to sit in the corner and ask themselves where it all went so terribly wrong, while the Conservatives get everything up and running and we all live a better standard of living. We all have our own house if that's what we desire, a car that we can afford, and lots of money to spend on, whatever it is you spend your money on. That's just my opinion. You can let me know what your opinion is down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.